Welcome to 4.0 to Pro, the pickleball podcast that focuses on a single shot, tip, or strategy to improve your pickleball game with every single pocket-sized episode. Our goal is to make you better on the court every time you hear our voices.
And gentlemen, welcome to another episode of 4.0 to Pro, your pocket-sized pickleball podcast, where we teach you a single shot or strategy every single episode. I'm Michael O'Neill here in sunny Long Beach, California, joined by one Mircea Murariu there in Aspen, Colorado. What is going on, Jude?
Hello, my friend. I'm just here in Aspen, enjoying the weather, enjoying some great pickleball, meeting a lot of great people. So very grateful to be out here. It's been a great experience, and might end up doing it again next year. So we'll see.
Love it. Maybe I'll be there next year.
That would be great.
It would. So we're doing a Q&A show this time. We haven't done one. You know, we haven't done a Q&A show since like May or June. So it's been a little minute since we've done this. And I apologize for the somewhat sporadic release of these shows between Mircea's new schedule in Aspen and me going through a pretty hardcore deadline in my other life. We've been having a harder time to connect. But we're doing it now, dude. We got a Q&A show for him right now, don't we?
Let's do it. Let's do it, my friend.
Before a little housekeeping, we are still driving towards doing a clinic, another camp in Texas. We've got 13 people that are already on the list for that. So if you'd like to come to our camp, our first one in Florida, in Fort Lauderdale, was unbelievable. It was awesome. So we're going to do same kind of deal, 4 VIPs and 20 regular campers. It'll be kind of a 3-dayer. We haven't gotten any of the details yet or the venue or anything locked down, but just know that if you'd like to go, you can reach out to me at picklehelp.com, or you can email 40topro@gmail.com. That's all spelled out, FOUROHTOPRO. And then, of course, on the Instagram as well.
I think it would be worthwhile kind of recapping briefly the structure of the camp. We had one full day that was dedicated to the VIPs, which were 4 people, so we got a chance to individually play with them and work with them. That was amazing. So it was 2 sessions, morning and afternoon. We had a great dinner/happy hour meet and greet type of thing that Thursday evening. Then Friday and Saturday, we had 2 sessions, morning and afternoon, with 24 people total. And then we had lunch every day. We had a great in-person podcast where we had Q&A and interaction. All in all, it's just an amazing weekend. There's just so many great people that came, and we're, again, grateful for the people that came out and showed up, and felt like just everyone got really a lot better over the course of the few days. So that was a fantastic experience. Want to repeat that again for sure.
Yeah, we could see it. We could see their improvement from Thursday until Saturday. And without getting too in the weeds about this, because we will do a dedicated show kind of talking about the camp, the structure isn't what you guys have probably done in the past, where you've just worked on like dinks and drops and things like that. We really try to bring this show to the camp where there's a lot of communication, there's a lot of strategy, there's a lot of court positioning and that kind of thing. You'll get into some details down the road, but if you'd like to attend and you'd like to at least get on the list when we release the tickets and that kind of thing, just email us over there or go to picklehelp.com and you can drop me a line. All right, let's get into the questions, Mircea. From Paul, he says, with dinks, I'm struggling with the idea that you must get behind every ball. I see many pros doing a half lunge and pivot, especially on their backhand dinks. They can effectively dink reaching outside the core triangle. I do agree that stretching for balls uncomfortably is always a mistake. However, it contradicts the idea that you must be behind every ball if you can stretch comfortably. Is it a great beginner philosophy to keep everything within your shoulders and be behind every ball? But can it be different as you get to more advanced levels? Kind of a little bit answering the question himself a little bit, Mircea. I love to, when people are just starting to dink and they're just getting their legs about them, if you will, I love to keep the dinks in between their knees if possible, without stretching too far out of that kind of core area. But what he's saying makes a lot of sense. You see a lot of pros really stretching with their arm straight on these backhand dinks where they're really reaching across their body and coming through. I think as long as you get the technical motion of that, it can also end up being a consistent shot. So it is maybe something that you can evolve to as you get a little better at pickleball.
I think this is a great question, and the way I look at it is you want to maintain your footwork to keep the ball in front of you, so the ball is not getting behind you. I think I'm going to interpret this by saying that you want your feet and your body behind the ball, so the ball is in front of you. So that's how I'm interpreting. I think it's a great point because I've been really emphasizing during this particular summer session of teaching the footwork behind dinking, where you have that stable wide base and then you move that base. It's a mobile base that can also be expanded. And what I mean by that, if you watch lower level or 3-0, 4-0, 5-0, even sometimes 4-5 players, when they are dinking and they have their feet together and they're stepping to the side to get balls where they should be expanding that base. For example, if I have a dink to my backhand and I take my right foot and cross over instead of having that wide base and stepping with my left foot, so I open up that base and keep that ball in front of me, it does a few things. It keeps the ball in front of you, so it helps with your balance, so you're balanced. You want to be still when you're hitting the ball, and it helps with your recovery and your reaction time. And not only that, particularly in the demographic that I've been teaching here, it dramatically improves that stability to decrease the chance of injuries. You hear about all these injuries in pickleball, and what do they come down to really? They come down to falls for the most part, or being off balance. That's really the bulk of the injuries. So the reason that is people go out there and run around without any fundamental footwork, and they're crossing. And I mean, just go out to the court, stand up, put your feet 2 inches together and try bending your knees. Feels weird.
Yeah.
And then try putting your feet a little bit more than shoulder width apart and bend your knees. It feels completely comfortable, active, stable, balanced. So what I've realized is how huge that fundamental footwork is to keep your base stable. Now, does that mean that you will never cross over? Of course not. So many of these things that we are talking about are the optimal footwork and the optimal patterns or thought process or strategy or technique that you're trying to learn and instill consistently. That's really what it's all about. Yes, you are going to have to cross at times. If you do cross, if you notice, even the pros, Ben Johns, for example, when the ball gets behind him and he has to cross over, his dinks aren't quite as good as when he's more balanced. It's just, that's the way it is. That doesn't mean that you're never going to cross over, you're never going to be lunging. You just want to maintain that stability as much as possible for the vast majority of your shots.
Yeah, I agree. I always like to envision myself as a pyramid, especially when I'm at the kitchen line, and think about the visual of that. Like if I were to create a magical robot that could be the best dinker on court that day, I would start with a pyramid shape and then have a robot arm towards the top. And I would just move that pyramid left and right in the box, and that robot arm would be very stable and directing the ball right where I wanted it. So that stability of a really nice wide shoulder width and then staying square to the net versus turning and showing them your back. That's what we're trying to avoid. Sometimes it happens, like you said, but we'd like to avoid that when at all possible. Now, Frederick says, "Hey, Michael, thanks for the show. I'm a big fan." Hi, Frederick. Been listening since the beginning. I'm 4-0-ish, been playing for about 3 years without any prior racket sport experience. I would love to hear a show on the triangle principle and how to use it to set up patterns. I'm curious if or how it changes when I'm playing left side with a lefty partner. Now, I've heard, Mircea, 4 different triangle analogies for pickleball. So like anywhere from speeding up to one particular limb and it comes back the other way, or is it another nomenclature for effectively isolating somebody on the other side where you're going to one particular player? I'm curious how you read this, and if you have an opinion on, I mean, certainly I hope you have an opinion on this, but how you read this as a question.
To sum it up, it's all those things. The fundamental pyramid, I think, usually refers to how someone is speeding up in order to create offense and get the ball often for another wing or their partner. For example, if I speed up, I'm on the left, I speed up with my backhand, sort of cross body to the left side of the person in front of me, that ball will usually ricochet towards my forehand or my partner. So we're creating that triangle in that fashion. I feel that.
So if I'm on the right, then I should be ready for a backhand counter when you speed up to that particular hip.
Exactly.
Because you're speeding up and you're hoping for a forehand in the middle, because a lot of times balls funnel to the middle in those situations. So that's how you're reading this.
Exactly. Or the other example, and again, you can think of this as a wall. So if I'm hitting against a wall and I'm hitting forehands and I'm hitting straight ahead in front of me, that ball will come back to my forehand volley. Like if I'm volleying towards straight ahead. So it's going to be forehand to forehand. Now, if I adjust that and move the ball location slightly to my left or right in front of me, so I hit a forehand volley against the wall, it will come back like a V or like a triangle, if you will, to my backhand. So if I reach in as the left side player and I flick a forehand volley into the body or like the right hip of the right side player directly in front of me, that often will ricochet to my backhand.
I think so too. According to Perplexity, that ball comes back where you expect it 70% of the time. So if you attack that right hip with your backhand, it's coming back to your forehand 70% of the time, according to completely unresearched AI. Robert Otten says, I'm dying to know Mircha's gym routine / split. I'm 50 and I've been active with lifting and running and then added pickleball in January. I've had a hard time keeping up with weights, learned a lot about joint health. What kind of weight routine do you recommend? I actually am in the same boat, Mircha. I'm now almost a month out from my surgery. It'll be a month and 2 days. And now I'm going to start integrating weight training back into my life again. So I'm just as curious about what you do for your sort of regular.
Well, first I want to kind of preface this by saying this is all individual. So if you really want to get a good weight routine going, I strongly recommend getting a professional to at least start you out. A personal trainer, obviously this stuff has to be cleared by a physician and has to take into account any potential joint or back issues or other, health concerns you might have. That said, I highly recommend a regular weight lifting routine, and the way I do things, I try to keep a balance. So I will do typically biceps and back on one day, and I superset core, and then another day I will do shoulders and legs. Another day I will do chest and triceps, and I'll intersperse core work in almost every session. So I'll do one set of bench press, and then I'll do some core stuff. Then I'll do another set of bench press, do some core stuff. And I do that for 3 days in a row, then take a day or two off, depending on how my body feels. Then I do another 3, and I cycle it like that. There's sometimes I take a day off in between, so I might do 2 days in a row, then a day or 2 off. And then, depending on how much pickle I play, it's really important to listen to your body and rest when you need to, because recovery is a huge part of this process. It's really important. And along those lines, that's why we love the Yobo apparatus, is that we can help us recover, help us warm up.
Are you saying you work out 6 days a week if you on a busy week? It seems like a lot.
Minimum 5.
Wow. Okay.
Minimum 5. But I rest. I usually take one or 2 days off in between. So I typically do 5 days a week.
Walter says, I watch the ball when I receive a serve, but I lose focus in the heat of battle. Please help me focus. Dude, welcome to the club, sir. I feel like I've never taken it in my life, but I feel like I need a main line of Adderall or something to maintain focus on the court. It is not easy for me, being an ADD kid. There was somebody pressure washing a wall the other day, which kept bothering me during the game. There was another guy in another court that sounded like Arnold Schwarzenegger yelling every time he hit the ball. They were playing singles. And that was bothering me. And I really just have to tell myself 1 or 2 things for a particular point to focus on this one thing. And then I go into the point thinking about that one thing versus just playing completely free. I do have to put a little bit of thought into it. Mircha, I know you do not have the same issues based on pretty much everything you've ever said. But for those of us that do have trouble maintaining focus, the other thing I will say, this is going to be a weird one, and I don't recommend this for everybody, but there was a great show called The Way I Heard It by Mike Rowe, who did Dirty Jobs. And he basically, I don't know if you guys ever heard of Now You Know the Rest of the Story with Paul Harvey back in the day, but he would basically tell these origin stories of all of these different products and things that we know, in the zeitgeist of the world and their origin, like where they came from. So at the beginning of the show, they had these little 10-minute, a really fun story that he would write. And then at the very end, he would tell you like, oh, this is this president that flew in World War II or whatever it was, or here's where Pringles came from, whatever it was. But in this particular thing, the Twitter version is, think like Matt Damon, genius guy, went to Princeton when he was like a kid, had no ability to focus whatsoever because his brain was really hyperactive, and then ended up joining an ashram for like 8 years and used all of these Ayurvedic concoctions to try to maintain his focus, and at some point said, I should think about selling this. So he brought it to America, but the FDA wouldn't let him use the word focus, but they did let him use the word energy, and that's where 5 Hour Energy came from. That's the origin of that product. And when I heard that, I said, yeah, whatever. And then I tried one, and I'll be danged if it didn't work for me. So I can't recommend you take an energy drink, everybody, but something about the caffeine and stuff like that before I play pickleball does tend to do its thing. So there are probably pharmaceutical and non-pharmaceutical ways to do what you'd like to do.
Yeah, I would strongly like to stick to the non-pharmaceutical. There are quite a few pro players that do use performance-enhancing substances that are not necessarily, and I don't mean illegal ones. I just mean, energy drinks, prescription ones, which is fine. But I would, that's not something that I do or would recommend. I don't like energy drinks in general. For me, there's just too much caffeine, and I drink a lot of coffee just from when I was
full disclosure, this
training.
man's sipping a Coke right now. I just want you guys to know that's actually happening.
I'm actually sipping a.
Yeah, what was
right
that was
Fiji.
don't even. I saw the Coke before you did that. By the way, didn't Jessie Irvin or used to have a rum in her tournament bag? Wasn't she famous for that? She did a What's in Your Bag a couple years ago, and she had like a thing of Malibu rum in it. So maybe that works for you. Who knows? Not easy.
That's something that I wouldn't know anything about. So.
The point is, though, it's not easy to focus on a pickleball court. There's so much chaos in this little compact amount of time.
But I think like everything else, it's a skill. And it's a skill that if you want to get better at, you need to practice. And you can do this with intentional rec games where when you play a rec game, you choose some things that help you focus, and that might be different for everyone. So, because if you go to a tournament and you haven't done this, of course you're going to get nervous. Of course you're going to lose focus. It's definitely a more chaotic environment at a tournament. You're going on and off. There's people all over the place, different skill levels. You're playing on different courts. So there definitely is an element of chaos that you want to have some control over. And the only way you can do that is to do what you can do, which is focus on yourself and what you need. Now, for me, intentional breathing between points helps. What I like to do as well is focus on my footwork at the beginning of the point. And like you said, ideally, you're doing some sort of communication with your partner that we've talked about before. So you can tell your partner, hey, let's return up the middle. And you think about returning up the middle. Or you focus on something that your opponents are doing, which I really like to do when I'm doing rec games. I will focus on certain aspects of their movement or their paddle angles or their court positioning, and that helps me anticipate certain shots, and in a way that helps slow the game down for me. It also helps not to rush through balls, not to be moving through the midcourt. And while this may not directly tie to focus, I feel it indirectly ties to focus, because when you stop and are able to analyze your opponents, how they're hitting the ball, you're able to anticipate better and move to the ball better and hit better shots. So I feel that indirectly improves your focus. Again, it's just a skill that you really need to work on, and you have to figure out something that works for you. So breathing, focus on your footwork, focus on learning how your opponents are hitting shots and where they're hitting shots. And you can focus on a different aspect of that with each rec game. Pick a rec game where you just focus on your opponents. Pick a rec game where you're working on your breathing. And then the more you do that, the more you can develop a routine to put that all together and translate into focusing in a competitive environment like a tournament.
Okay, I'll take your word for that. The other thing I like to do is I'll look down between points. So I won't look up and see all the chaos of 100 different games going on around me and all the balls and all the sounds. And I will tend to get pretty locked in, and I look down at the court and try to keep the input as calm and few and far between as I can. But it's not easy. I'm one of you, buddy. It's not an easy thing for some of us to do that aren't named Mircea. Amanda says, my partner and I absolutely love your podcast. Could you do a segment on how to make adjustments when you are playing former tennis players who seem to defy all odds with their inside-out shots? The strategy seems to be ineffective when they can line up and direct the ball to either sideline from the tee at the baseline. We tried the Vampire Fourth, but really struggled to win points. For reference, we're 3-5 level. Keep up the great work. Hope to come to your camp next year. Mircea, one thing I will say is when I get on a court with someone who clearly has a tennis background, they've got lovely shots and they are lacing it pretty much anywhere they want, I will cover line more than I would if I was against a normal pickleball player, because those tennis players aren't afraid to look at a 18-inch window from the sideline into the court and rip it right down that line, whereas a normal pickleball player maybe doesn't have that skill set. And then, of course, the kind of no-look inside-out thing that she's talking about, kind of hard to defend if they've already gotten the touch. You know, if they're Jack Sock, who's got a laser rifle forehand and also can do an inside-out droppy hybrid type third, a drip, if you will. Not an easy thing to defend for anybody, but I'm doubting that at 3-5 that is the case in this particular instance.
There are several things that come to mind, one of which may help is changing up the pace of the ball. So tennis players, and we'll assume for the sake of simplicity for this question that they're driving a lot of balls, right? And so they want the ball in their wheelhouse, which is generally about waist or abdomen level. What do we want to do? We try to change that spot. So maybe we throw up some high returns or some slightly low returns. Say we try to use the geometry of the court to not give them angles. We play more balls in the middle. Or if we hit them balls when they're at the midcourt or the kitchen line, we try to get it more low in between their feet, so they would have to turn. If they are hitting an inside-out forehand, so that means from the left side, someone hits a forehand towards the backhand of the player on the left side.
Right.
So if I know that they're continually hitting that, I tell my partner, hey, if you're returning to Joe, who's on the left side, and you return to his forehand, he's been going inside out, so I have to cover my line a little bit more, so I need you to come up more towards the middle. Usually you want to cover middle, but if someone is burning you on the same shot over and over because they have a unique skill set, then you just have to adjust to that. But the biggest thing I would say is the basics, where you try to slow it down like we talked about before. You try to move the ball so it's not right in the wheelhouse, a little bit higher, a little bit lower, maybe a little softer, and then you try to use the geometry of the court to maximize your court positioning by limiting their angles and maybe go more towards the middle.
Yeah, angles begat angles. So if you end up putting the ball in the corners of the court, they've got good angle options, because if I return to that left side guy and I put it all the way in that corner pocket, he can step back very a la Jack Sock and absolutely demolish it right down the line by turning on it, or he can go inside out on it. But if I hit it right in the middle at the tee, they've got a lot less angle option there. They have a lot less they can do with that ball. And I also love attacking body on tennis players, because they typically have a kind of a push slice volley. They don't have the roll or punch volley yet. So it gives you a little bit of opportunity to get maybe a little more of a pop-up attackable ball if you go body on them. And I really liked what you said about between their feet is a really good target. So
exactly.
Bottom line is, it's not easy when someone comes with 20 years of tennis experience and they can kind of hit it where they want it. There's a clear advantage there. So you have to make them play pickleball and not tennis pickle. Sweaty hands. My hands become so sweaty during play that I'm losing my grip and it's affecting my play. I live in a hot and humid climate, and especially during long sessions outdoors, I'm absolutely drenched in sweat. My hands get so wet that my paddle slips when hitting drives and flicks, and I'm becoming increasingly frustrated and losing points because of this. Now, I still go way old school with my grip, my actual over grip, which is I use the Tourna grip that I used when I was a kid, and to me, it's the most absorbent of over grips that you can get. Like the regular old school Tourna grip is really good for me. And then prior to you, I would just wear a sweatband on my hand. And then I learned this tip from you. So why don't you tell them what you like to do?
Well, that's the reason I wear a sleeve, because when I started playing in Florida, I was using a sweatband and it wasn't enough. And then I used 2 sweatbands and they still weren't enough. And then I discovered sleeves. So sleeves tend to keep your arm cool. They're wicking and they really help that sweat from dripping down into your palm and hand. People also use different kinds of powders or creams that are basically tacky or drying. So that's another way, like talc powder, the tacky overgrips. I prefer the Wilson perforated overgrips. I find that those last the longest. I used to use the Turner grips as well, but I don't feel they last as long for me. I've really loved the Wilson overgrips, and no sponsorship or code or anything like that, but that's typically what I use. The combination of the wristband, the sleeve, and the Wilson overgrips do it for me. But you can just experiment with different tacky overgrips if you like those. I've heard some people really like those. Or I've seen people take the tacky towels or tacky powders out to the court and use those in between games.
I'm on to the sleeve now. You turned me on to wearing sleeves. I thought they were really only for sun protection, but I do find they do a tremendous job in keeping the sweat off your hands. In fact, in the APP tournament, Mircea, it's kind of interesting because you don't have your bag. They don't let you bring your bags onto the courts. And I was kind of buried in this court where I kind of needed my bag. I needed something from it. I couldn't get it. I had forgotten to put my sleeve on and I kept going, why is my hand so sweaty? And I was like, oh, that's why. Because I forgot to put the sleeve on. So if I want to double it up, I'll do a sleeve and I will still do a wristband right there. That's sort of my double threat. But man, there's nothing more frustrating than when it gets super hot and humid and you just can't seem to keep a good interface. And to me, interface is so important. One thing I will say also, guys, is some people use the hexacore grips, and that helps them even when it's really sweaty. Well, certainly, Mircea, when you're on the court, we can find you because you always have the one sleeve. It's
Yep.
always a thing. So, folks, that's going to do it here for today's little Q&A. Thank you, as always. Once again, if you'd like to grab a spot, or at least a potential spot for our Texas camp that we have not confirmed at all yet, but, get on the list anyway, please do that at picklehelp.com. If you have any more questions you'd like us to answer, you can send them also at picklehelp.com. I'll add them to our little file here, so the next time we do a Q&A show, your question will be answered. Thank you, Mircea. You are a rock star, sir.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you very much.
Folks, you've now just listened to another episode of 4.0 to Pro. As always, thank you guys for subscribing. Find us on the old Instagrams at 4.0 to Pro. Find Mircea at BrainsDoc, and I'm at Solo Hour. So for Mircea, I'm Michael. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to 4.0 to Pro. For more tips, find us on Instagram at 4.0 to Pro. If you have a pickleball question, submit it at picklehelp.com. Now, get out there and dominate. But don't forget to have fun.